In the last video, I talked about how the back was the next step. Yeah, I totally lied. The shelf is next. And so many different cabinet companies actually approach this in so many different ways. You have to think about whether or not your shelf is built in or if you want to have adjustable shelves in your base cabinet. You also need to think about how deep the shelf is and how far do you want to reach into the base cabinet to put something on the shelf, and also how high the shelf is and how thick it is. So many things to think of for just a little shelf. Isn't that crazy? Well, our cabinet company had their shelves built in, so that means that you can't adjust the shelf in any way, shape, or form. We used half-inch particle or plywood, and it was about a foot deep and a foot high inside the cabinet. So we're going to follow those same parameters, and again, just know that every cabinet company approaches base cabinet shelves very differently, and it's okay that they do. So let's go back to AutoCAD actually to kind of help us plan this out and see how to put this all together. So I'm coming back to AutoCAD. We have our section is still being made right here. We've got the elevation. This was showing us what the actual side dimensions were going to be for our cabinet. So coming in here, the cabinet shelves always sit against the back of the cabinet. So this is the front and this is the back. So again, our cabinets were 1 foot from the bottom of the cabinet up, and they also came out 1 foot, because sometimes it's nice to have some space out here. If you have some tall items that you want to do, you don't want a shelf going the entire space, because then you can't stack things, you can't put tall items in your cabinet. So it's good to have kind of like a half shelf in the back. So I'm going to make sure I'm back on E again, just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to use the line command, and let's hover in this very back corner, and we're going to go up 1 foot. Enter, and that places the line, and we're ready to actually make the shelf. So let's do 1 foot out. And then let's come down 0.5 inches so that we can show the thickness of this shelf. Again, the back of the shelf attaches to the back of the cabinet. We haven't added the back yet, but we're going to. That's always the last step. And then it's important to understand when you have a cabinet that has 2 doors, this little shelf needs some extra support. And usually what we did is we put a little, gosh, it could have been any size really, but I think we did a little 1.5 inch by 1 inch piece that sat right behind the mullion, but it gave support to the shelf. So I'm going to go ahead and use a line command, and we didn't make it flush, we actually let it sit back about a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to hover, come back, use that extension line, 0.5 inches, and I'm going to drop this straight down. And again, this piece was approximately, well, here, make sure that you get it straight down, not at an angle. It's about 1 inch thick. So I'm going to use the offset command, 1 inch thick, and I'm going to click and put it back. So again, if you have something heavy, you don't want your plywood or your particle board to start drooping, because here, let's show what this would look like. This is coming across here, so that is where the shelf lives. In the front elevation, we're going to offset that 0.5 inches. We're going to trim it out of the mullion. And actually, if you wanted to get really technical with this, you could put 2 lines here, and we could actually get those to be dashed so that it looks like it's actually behind the mullion itself. What does dashed regular look like? That's a little better. So again, when you see dashed lines, it means it's behind something or it's inside something, is kind of what it's indicating. And then that little piece, if I were to do a center mark, and it was approximately, you could even do 3 inches, but let's just, for sake of doing this, this is a 2 inch piece. So I'm going to offset 1 inch on both sides of this center. There's my support bar. And again, these would be dashed as well because they're sitting behind oops, wrong area, behind the actual mullion itself that's on the front. So this piece right here is also this piece right here. See how that works? Isn't that beautiful? That's so beautiful. Okay, and again, it's because if you put something heavy on this shelf, what tends to happen over time is even though the plywood or particle board are pretty sturdy, it just needs a little extra support on these big cabinets. So if you have a cabinet that only has one door and one drawer, you probably don't need to have this extra support in the middle. But on cabinets with two doors, two drawers, it definitely helps to make sure that your shelf is going to be long lasting. The other thing that happens is on the corners over here, so on the left and right, and underneath here, we tend to put little cleats again, very similar to this. We used, I believe they were 1x1s. Maybe they were 2x2s. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it was 2x2s. So I'm going to come down 2 inches, and they were 4 inches long. Did I do that right? 4. Enter. I did. Okay. Maybe they were 1x1s. Let's do it 1x1s. Are you guys hating me now? You probably are. Like, Jessica! Get it straight, lady. I'm kind of going fly by the pants here. Oh, I guess I didn't. Did I not do a line there? Okay. I'm going to trim this out so that you can kind of see, and I guess then if we're doing it to the other one, we should do it to this one. Let's go ahead and make this line dashed so that you can tell it's behind this main support beam right here. So these little cleats, again, they're for support. They're stapled in and possibly glued as well, and it just gives more support on the sides for the shelf. And honestly, we also put them in the back. So usually there's like one kind of centered here, and there's usually one centered here, and that would also show up on the cross section this way. So these are 1x1, so make sure that we do 1 inches back so they look like little squares. And because they're going back in space, because we're seeing like the cut edge, I think that's another way to kind of think of these X's. These are the cut edges, and that's why we don't give an X to this, because this isn't a cut edge. The cut edge is actually on this side. So the little cut edge right here indicates that, and then basically what would happen, the cleat actually is hiding behind here on the sides, but these guys would be like 1 inch, 4 inch, and they would be centered. I'm not doing a very good job of centering, but this again is just for demonstration purposes. I'm just going to eyeball it, and then I'm going to mirror it to the other side so that you can see how the supports get it on the back, the sides, as well as the front. And we only do the one behind the mullion, mostly because if you have it like in your main opening, it's really hard to get stuff underneath the cabinets with supports like in the middle of your opening. So we just do the one in the middle, and that is basically what it looks like for your shelf. So let's go ahead and put the shelf into SketchUp, kind of with the same understanding. Let's work in the back this time. Usually at the cabinet shop, we would have the cabinet face down at this point, and we'd be installing a shelf using a couple different guides that we would have. But we're in SketchUp, and we don't need to have the guides the same way. So I am going to take my trusty handy dandy measuring tape tool, and on the back edge of this bottom, I'm going to bring that up 1 foot. That's going to help me know where the top of this is going to be, of the shelf. And then I'm going to come to the top of the cabinet, and I'm going to drag down a guide, and it's going to come all the way down to where it meets that first guide I put in. So now I can kind of start seeing where the shelf is going to live. I'm also going to make a guide from this guide, pull it forward. How far? 1 foot. This just helps me draw a lot easier when there's guides and all I have to worry about is tracing them. So I'm going to take the rectangle tool. I'm going to start in a corner. It doesn't really matter what corner you start in, and then you just kind of go to the opposite side. You should have a blue rectangle. And then when you do, just go ahead and click to make it stick. And then let's give it the thickness of a 1/2 inch. Beautiful. And then it's all just a matter of putting in your support. So again, in AutoCAD, just to show you, we gave it a 1/2 inch lip right here. So we'll give it a 1/2 inch lip in SketchUp. Gets a little tricky when you start working on the inside of things. So what I like to do is find the center first and then kind of work off of that. So let's get the measuring tape and get a guide out and find the center of this. Looks like a cyan dot on the back side. So there we can find the center. So if this was a 2-inch piece, I'm going to pull another guide out 1 inch. I'm going to pull another guide out another inch. So that way I have a 2-inch wide area for where that support's going to be. And then, woo, from the front. I know we're kind of working in a weird place here, guys. I hope you're following. Grab it from the front and bring a guide back 0.5 inches. Now the guide itself, the support piece itself was 1 inch thick. So I'm also going to bring this back 1 inches. And basically this little rectangle that was made, that is where your support is going to be. So let's go ahead and let's do one thing first. Let's triple click on this shelf and let's make that a group. Excellente. Now we can go ahead and make a rectangle down here. Right there as it shows. Do you guys see how that's working? Just like that. And let's push and pull that down. This is again going to get a little tricky. You might have to kind of zoom out a little bit to understand what you're doing. But we need to go all the way down to the ground. Yeah, das ist gut, yeah. Oh yeah, this is going to be really tricky. Lots of zooming in and out. Try to get it. And it should kind of feel like, sometimes I like to go to the edge to make sure that it goes all the way down. And it looks like it did. So again, as I was pushing and pulling, I actually kind of used the edge here to help me get it to go all the way down. Otherwise, what you could have done is you could have come out here and made a 2-inch by 1 inch rectangle and then lifted it up basically 11.5 inches so that it could fit under here, because the shelf itself was a 1/2 inch as well. So a couple options, but now you can kind of see how that hides behind. You see how that's hiding, but it's still giving support to our shelf. And then we add our little cleats underneath here. So it might be easier. Let's see here. Nah, we could do this. We could totally do this. Measuring tape tool. Come underneath the shelf and drag down a guideline that is 1 inch thick. Because remember, the cleat is literally right underneath the shelf itself. So I'm also going to match like the 1/2 inch lip that we gave it. So I'm going to go to the back side of the cabinet and I'm going to bring a guide so that it actually aligns with the 2 guides that I already had here. And then these are 4 inches long, so we have to like grab a guide from here and pull it back. Make sure you're on the green axes, 4 inches. And then all we have to do is draw a rectangle. Isn't this so exciting, you guys? Push and pull it forward 1 inch. And there is our support cleat for our shelf on the side, in case you add some heavy things onto it. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. You could copy that and paste it over. It might be a little complicated. Sometimes I feel like it's easy to just redraw things. So we're going to pull a guide from the back And we're going to match it up to the guide underneath here. Make sure it says 1 inch. Then we take a guide from that guide and we pull it back on the green axes 4 inches. We're going to pull a guide from underneath the shelf down 1 inch so that we can see where that little cleat is going to live. Use the rectangle tool to go ahead and draw that in. Push and pull it out 1 inch. And if you want to get really fancy with it, let's triple click on it and make it a group. Let's be sure to do the same thing over here. Make that a group. And we did not make the support a group, so let's triple click and just make it a group. We're just going to stick with the way that we're doing things. That way, if we feel like we need to move it for any reason, like we're free to move it, it's not going to stick to anything. You know, we can kind of like bring it out and do whatever we want. All right, we'll add the back clips once we get the back on, but now I promise the back is next.